I don't talk about it a lot on this app, but 10 or no, 20 years ago, I worked for ICE. So my first real job out of school, I was a contractor at the headquarters, 425 I Street, which has since been torn down. And yeah, it was a very interesting time. I have lots of stories. Met my wife there, who was also working there, which is a weird thing to say. But I bring that up because, like a lot of people, pretty disturbed by ICE's presence on Lower Broadway. I've lived in Nashville now for almost 10 years. And like a lot of folks, I find it troubling that ICE is just wandering in to establishments on Lower Broadway to try to bust people. But I also find it disturbing because of something I learned when I worked at ICE. So while I was there, I got to know some field office directors. And the good ones, and I knew they were good because I knew their metrics, were some of the, and this is going to sound strange given ICE's current reputation, but some of them were the genuinely the most caring people I've ever met. And I know that sounds strange, but at the time, and this is under W. Bush, and I was there for a little bit of Obama, ICE's real job, or a big part of its job, was just deporting people who had committed crimes. Typically, these were violent crimes or crimes that were the outcome could have posed significant risk to society. So, any assaults, they deported a lot of people that had DUIs, that kind of thing. And they also had a pretty big investigative unit, which is important for later. But I remember meeting some FODs, and particularly the one in Denver at the time, who was just an incredible person, PhD in psychology, I believe, and started his career as a social worker. And I was asking what made him effective. And he said, my job is to protect the citizens of Denver, and my job is to have a relationship with the immigrant communities that are here. If the immigrant communities, if the good people that came over, maybe they came over illegally, but if they're here just trying to work an honest living, I need them to tell me and to help me know about the bad guys that are here, right? I don't want them to be afraid of me. I want them to collaborate with me. And by the same token, I need local law enforcement to want to work with me so that when we do need to deport someone bad or they do need help with an investigation, that I can do those things. So we can all to serve and to make this community better. And he said, and I'm not making this up, if ICE is going out and doing traffic stops and doing big public busts, like, I don't know, hanging out on Lower Broadway, it's like, that's when you know that the ICE office is ineffective. Because they're doing two things. One, they're pissing off local law enforcement, right? That's generally local law enforcement's job. So it's basically them coming in and saying, I got to do this for you. And two, and this is probably more important, they are threatening and they are destroying any trust that they may have had with the local immigrant population who, although maybe here illegally, some of them, are also their best source of information for the violent criminals who are here. I mean, even if you came here illegally, came to the U.S. illegally, if you are not a violent person, you don't want to live in a violent community or neighborhood. So he said, he started laughing at all of this, but he's like, you can tell a FOD is dumb and ineffective if they make ICE's presence known at every chance they get. Which brings us back to what's happened in Nashville. And it really makes me realize that whoever is running ICE here is probably monstrously ineffective. And, oh, by the way, Metro Nashville Police, granted, I'm, a white guy and I've got some privilege, but they're mostly trusted. They're kind of okay. Like, they're not in the news. Like, every interaction I've had with them has been maybe not positive, but it hasn't been bad. So we have good local law enforcement. They solve crimes. I mean, look at what happened at Covenant. Look at what happened the other week on the Demumbrian Bridge. I mean, our cops are good cops. So the fact that ICE feels the need to go to Lower Broadway and try to deport some dishwasher trying to earn enough to support his kids, or a line cook who, is sending money back to Guatemala. I mean, it's just pathetic. And do you think the people in those communities are going to want to talk to someone from the Office of Investigations at ICE now? Do you think if they have information on someone doing human trafficking or whatever contraband, that they're going to go to ICE? No. In a lot of ways, I'm really thankful for my time at ICE because it helped me realize what good and bad law enforcement was. And I can tell you right now, ICE in Nashville is not good law enforcement. This is a good question. So one, I was 25 and really just needed a job. Two, I really liked the MD who ran my group, as well as the guy that ran the project. They were both very thoughtful, smart folks. And three, it was kind of my way of giving back a little bit. So at the time, ICE was a very young agency. It had been given all this money by the federal government, and it wasn't spending focused on efficiency. And part of my job was to help the field offices in the cities get their real estate in order. So get better leases, get better facilities, kind of manage the portfolio in a way that wouldn't burn so much cash. It should be noted that at the time, ICE wasn't nearly as politicized. My client, who oversaw real property and property, was very left-leaning, despite having been appointed by the Bush administration. You all seem to like the video I made about my time at ICE and what I learned there, so I thought I'd make another one. And this time, I'm going to talk a little bit about Doge. So when I was at ICE, I was in the real property division, which basically was the group of ICE that coordinated and executed on the real estate portfolio. So new leases, new purchases, build outs, that kind of thing. And while I was there, I worked a lot with GSA, the General Services Administration. So the way to think about GSA is they're the procurement arm of the government. They do things like handle real estate and supplies for federal agencies. And because I was real property, I worked a lot with GSA. So we would work through GSA to secure a lease, get new property, that kind of thing. So ICE would lease property from GSA, who in turn would lease it from the building's owner. This is important because Doge claims, using their numbers, I think it's somewhere around 460 million in savings on canceled leases or early terminations of leases. So most of those are with GSA. But here's the problem. When I was at ICE, we would go out of our way not to do an early termination or cancellation. And you may be thinking, why? Answer's easy. Those fees to terminate those deals and leases were borderline punitive. They were really high. They were high for a good reason. So ICE and many other federal agencies have unique requirements that make zero sense for most other commercial tenants. So for example, ICE has holding cells. They have sally ports. They have armories. I don't think your law firm looking to lease a new building wants any of those things. Another interesting thing they have are these things called SCIFs, which are secured communication rooms. Those are interesting because the lack of desire to use a SCIF, even a portable SCIF, was part of the reason for the whole single gate Pete Hegseth debacle, but that's another story. So anyway, the government agencies have all these special requirements that landlords have to do tenant improvements on and kind of make the property not as marketable should the federal agency leave. So there are these very high cancellation fees. And in many cases, it made more sense just to stay in the building or leave it vacant than to pay these cancellation fees. The equivalent would be if you're renting an apartment, let's say it's $1,000 a month, you had 4 months left on your lease, and to get out of your lease, you could either you could pay $10,000 to get out of it. Well, you wouldn't. You would just let it sit vacant, or you would just live there for another 4 months. So when Doge claims to have all these savings from canceled leases, that's my ears perked up, because I knew that in many times, yes, you could save on the lease expense, right? Technically, that's not a lease expense, but you would more than make up for it in cancellation fees. Just another fun tidbit from my time at ICE. One thing to think about in regards to like these ICE raids, the defunding, the NIH, RFK dismissing all the vaccine committee or whatever it is, the antagonizing our longstanding Democratic allies in Canada, Mexico, and Europe, is what is the outcome that our current leadership wants? In other words, what kind of world are they trying to build? And the And the fact of the matter is that for me personally, and I imagine many of you, I do want to live in a world where hardworking people who are fleeing violence and want to come to America can and support their families. I want to live in a world where we do invest in things like healthcare and eradicating disease. I do want to live in a world where, you know, the Italians and the British, who my grandfathers worked with during World War II, are our friends and our allies and our trade partners. And I look at the world and the people and the vision that many of these hardcore MAGA folks support. And it's not a world that I think 98% of Americans really want to live in. And it kind of begs the question, what is the world they want to live in, right? When a day laborer outside of a Home Depot can be picked up and detained with no due process just because he's trying to send a couple bucks back to wherever they came from, that's kind of a shitty world. And it's certainly not the America that I grew up loving. And it's definitely not the vision I have for the continued prosperity of humanity. It's antithetical to that. So if you're a hardcore MAGA person, or even someone who was fed up with whatever the Democrats were doing the past couple of years, I think it's worth asking yourself, what is your vision for the world? And what is the best way to bring it about? Because I can virtually guarantee that the actions the federal government is taking now are not building that world. Unless you're a piece of trash, in which case I get it. You know, like, you're a piece of trash. Like, I'm not worried about you. You're always gonna be a piece of trash. Anyway, I think it's worth just taking a pause and considering that. And I'm gonna go to work now.